Okay, good evening, everybody. Why don't we get started? Call the meeting to order. Budget Committee meeting, I think this is number 3, but the first one where we're going to be looking at a budget. Before I get started, John, you want to have a couple comments?
Yes, thanks very much, Colin. I've thought about the past year, my return to the board here, and have a few thoughts as we get into this year that I would like to relate to you. As I sit here tonight, I wonder how many of my fellow committee members have actually read the minutes from June 7th and August 30th, which we are to approve after making needed changes or corrections. We are, to a certain degree, attesting that these minutes are accurate. Another benefit of reading the minutes of prior meetings refreshes the members' minds as to what has gone on in the past, and in this case, what we are planning this coming session. Last year, in my opinion, the Budget Committee did nothing. If it hadn't existed, the presented budget would not have changed. It was clear from the questions and ensuing conversation that many committee members had not prepared for the meetings and never had any intention of doing so. Comments such as, when it comes to budgeting, the department heads know what they need to do better than we do, were common and presented a cop-out from the duties we, as an elected body, are supposed to be doing. Perhaps we need to revisit what the role of the Budget Committee is. It is, quote, to provide a committee with special knowledge to oversee and analyze the expenditures of the various town departments. In this manner, the electorate, which would ordinarily be without detailed knowledge necessary to vote intelligently on certain budgetary problems, might be given sufficient information to determine the annual amounts necessary to properly manage town affairs. Since all departments tend to want more money in order to better perform the functions they are charged with, the Budget Committee becomes an arbiter, given power by the legislature to reconcile these appropriation requests to maintain the tax load within manageable proportions. We are supposed to be the arbiters. We look at both sides of the equation, but with the primary consideration of properly serving those who elected us. The budget presented the town is ours. The operating budget presented to us by the Select Board this year shows a proposed increase of 14.4%. When I was previously on the Budget Committee, we used to use 4% as a goal not to exceed. There are many of our neighbors this year who, for sometimes questionable reasons, have seen their tax burdens in some cases double. These include many with very humble lakefront properties and many in locations such as Hilltop. To add an operating budget increase of 14.4% to their burden is unconscionable. More than ever, we need to be fair and, most importantly, knowledgeable arbiters for people of all financial levels. If we have no intention of doing this, why do we bother to meet? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Yeah, hold on a minute. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I fully agree with your statement, but I think the Budget Committee, as elected officials, responds to a vision, and it must respond to a strategy, and it must respond to a plan for us to be the arbiter of a budget, and for us to say only 4%, that's really immaterial because we don't know what the town needs. How many of us have read the master plan of this town? How many people in the Budget Committee have read the master plan? And that is the one that gives us a vision, and that is the one that gives us the oomph of where we need to go as a budget committee and as a board of selectmen. And as a result, if we have to answer what the people want is encapsulated in a plan. And we need to provide an answer to a vision, and our duties and our activity as a budget committee must respond to a vision, or else we're just freelancing and cutting stuff that we don't even know why we're cutting it for. So I think going on in this year, this is my second year, yes, I'm going to be quite purposeful in ensuring that when we vote and what we do answers to a part of a plan and a vision that has been articulated in a master plan. If not, we're just wasting our time. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Anybody have any other comments?
I could respond to that.
If you want, go ahead.
This is an evening for me to be candid and frank. Historically, the master plan in this town has been a bunch of baloney. It is just been an impediment more than a good thing. It is put together by people that have one vision and one vision only. Seldom do we follow that, and seldom does it present things that the town really wants. They talked about having these little communities on Main Street in the previous plan, where you had the houses and the businesses and everything all lumped together. Everybody could sit on their front porch with their feet up on the rail and watch people walk down Main Street. The master plan, in my mind, is a waste of our money and a waste of our time as it is now being handled. Thank you.
Okay, so let's do this. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, John. Why don't we keep those conversations in context as we move forward tonight and into the following several weeks. Lou, I think that the master plan is a framework that gives us context. And I think John and I will disagree with that a bit, so that we all have our opinions, right? So that's all good. And I think that we should feel safe enough in the space to voice those opinions, and we should be as black and white as we can be without being offensive, right? So thank you for your opinion, and it's a conversation that needs to be had as we go through the budget, all right? So I'm going to go down the agenda. The first one is the approval of the minutes for June 7th and August 30th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Wait a minute. Any second?
Second.
Okay, now discussion. John, do you have any comments you want to make?
Which one did we do first?
You can do either one, June 7th or August 30th.
Okay, June's,
Hit the button.
On the August 3rd, on page 2, on the last paragraph, it talks about Mr. Lines, and I think it's Ms. or Mrs. Miss, but not Mr.
Sorry, Melissa, no disrespect intended.
No. On the June 7th one, on the third page, the first paragraph, the third line down, Charles Kelsey asked if funds invested in short-term interest-bearing instruments. I think we need to have a were invested in short-term interest-bearing instruments put in there. Those are my two corrections.
Anybody else have any other corrections? So I guess I'll modify the motion subject to John's input. You have a motion to approve? Yeah? Second. All in favor? Anybody against? Abstentions? Okay, thank you, John. Selectmen's update?
Just to give a little history on the budget. So far, the Selectmen met all day on October 27th to listen to presentations from all the department heads for the budget. Further, the Selectmen discussed the capital reserve account distributions and additions. And then we approved this version of the budget on November 9th. Subsequently, we've received an update from the library in light of recent personnel changes. The Selectmen will be reviewing those changes from the library tomorrow night, so that number may or may not change. As for the personnel change, the Selectmen were informed that the library director, Crystal Schimpf, has resigned her position, and her last day is January 5th. As regards the Colliers folks, the Selectmen have engaged the services of Colliers project leaders to provide project management services for a future New London Police Station project. Chief Cobb is now working with Tony DeLuzio, the Associate Director, on viewing potential locations for a new station and analyzing those sites to rank them best worst in terms of most suitable. We expect to have information in the coming weeks to share with all. The presentation by Colliers at the November 9th Selectmen's meeting is posted to the website. I encourage people to watch. The goal of the Selectmen is to get the information that voters have suggested they need before they can make decisions on this important issue. We have a winter gathering meeting, similar to the summer gathering meeting, scheduled for December 15th. And finally, Kim and I were on a call today with the coalition. What?
Yeah, Coalition 2.0.
Coalition Communities 2.0 regarding the school funding lawsuits. The two lawsuits that were filed, they had decisions handed down right before Thanksgiving. The Convale lawsuit, the judge voted that the adequacy funding levels were way too low. They should be lifted up to $7,800 from $4,300. And the Rand case decision said that the swept money that's collected, the tax money that's collected by the towns that over-collect, which New London is one of them, should not be allowed to keep that money, but that should be sent back to the state. So the Coalition Community 2.0 meeting today was with the lawyers to talk about the next steps. And so I just want everybody to know that we're on top of that and following it very closely. So that's it.
Thank you, Bibi. Anybody have any questions for Bibi? Bibi, I had two. One regarding the select board meeting on the budget that Friday. I don't recall the date.
Yeah.
You actually went through an exercise with each of the department heads about what if we cut you or added you, as an exercise that the school committee
Yep.
does. Did the school committee ever act on those questions?
No, what it was an exercise to try to get a feeling for what the priorities are for each department. And I know this is something that Lindsay hated. You hated the exercise, but because you felt like it was a way for us to try to decide if we should cut something away. But for us, I liked it because we learned things that sometimes we didn't necessarily hear during our board meetings. So for example, one year that we did it, one of the elementary school principals talked a lot about the mental health issues that he was having with the students and the behavioral issues and things like that. And these were students that weren't on IEPs. So it led us to a strategy to bring in more mental health counselors later on. It was something we weren't aware of. So that's what I did.
Just because those of you who may not have been at the meetings, so BB would ask each of the department heads, what would you do if we gave you, and the number was different, 10,000 more or 20,000 more, and what would you do if we cut your budget by 10,000 or 20,000? So it was an interesting exercise to hear it, and it might be something that we might want to consider doing ourselves, to think about it. And to John's point of earlier, to test the waters on what they're asking for and why, right? So it was just a thought. I thought it was a good exercise. The other question was more on the education lawsuits. What does it mean to us for the planning year, or is it something that's not a concern for this planning year?
To be honest. So currently, the town of New London, through the swept tax, collects approximately $2.5 million. We are only required to collect 1.5 million. You need a PhD to understand the funding formula for New Hampshire, but long story short, we're allowed to keep that extra 1.1 million that we collect through that SWEP tax. It used to be after the Claremont decision in the 90s, that money went back to the state and was then distributed out to other local towns that couldn't collect enough money, so we were called the donor town. In the early 2000s, we think, we're trying to remember today, the legislation passed a bill that said, nope, that those towns should be able to keep that money and not send it back to the state. So we've been able to keep that money. And then, so when you see that tax rate, you see the state tax rate and the local tax rate. So the state tax rate is that swept, and the local is the rest of the money that we need in the town to collect for the rest of the budget. If the RAND decision went into practice, we would have to send 1.1 million to the state, but we still need that 1.1 million for the school budget, so we would have to collect another $1 million. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay.
So it would increase the local taxes on the school budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the school budget, or the school district would have to cut their budget by $1 million.
So is it something that could take effect in the planning cycle that we're talking about in this budget cycle?
Yes, according to the judge's decision, but correct, Lindsay, no, because they're going to appeal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason why I ask is obviously I know that we're not responsible for the school budget, but we should keep in light of the full
should.
pressures on the taxpayer.
One of the attorneys on the call today made it very clear. He said, all these towns are going into deliberative sessions in January, and the taxpayers should know what they're going to have to be paying. And if this isn't decided by then, so anyway, it's a...
Yes, Lindsay.
I hate to even go here, but being on the budget committee too for the school district, I've often felt like it's a futile effort because it is the entity that we created with 6 other towns, and we are kind of at the mercy of 6 other jurisdictions agreeing cohesively with everyone on how to spend it. And quite frankly, in my opinion, the way our school district is kind of created together is extremely inefficient for funding purposes. And as a result, there are donor towns and/or towns that pay 53% of the operating budget for the entire district. And that is, unfortunately, the monster that we created in the 60s that I don't see how we're going to get out of. And unless we can work directly with, as I call them, the mothership, there's not a whole lot of things we can control as far as funding if we don't want it to affect our children and their education, because this is the setup that we have. And again, the setup that we have is dependent upon 6 other towns and their voting contingencies to agree collectively to change it, and it's probably not likely. So it's a rock and a hard place, and I don't like to necessarily state that publicly, but that is the absolute fact, and that is the, absolute of the matter, and that's what we've created over the long run.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any other questions or comments for BB? Go ahead, Lou.
I think as we're proceeding forward in our budget process, it would be an interesting, and I remember from my days in DOD budget, it would be a statement when you're looking at major items, impact if not funded. Because we tend to look at, hey, we need this, and, we need X, Y, and Z. Okay, what happens if we do not get X, Y, and Z? What happens if we only get X and Y? And I do remember that going to our, up the chain, and in that way, the honor is on management. You know what the repercussions or the results are going to be, but I think it would be it would behoove us to look at both sides of the aisle. What do we gain? What do we lose with a particular matter in the budget?
I agree. I mean, it comes down to the measure of risk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Bingo.
it's very similar to what Bibi was calling out when asking the questions, if I cut your budget by X amount of dollars, what do you take out? And then you can ask the question, what does that mean to the town, right? So I agree. I mean, I think that we can do a lot with those kinds of questions. So before we move into the budget introduction, is there any value in the team having a conversation about baselining what we think the economy is going to be and what context we're having this budget discussion in? I mean, I took some notes down. I was listening to a conference call, and there was, conversations about the interest rates. We all know what that's happening to us. Inflation rates are coming down, but we're still not at the price levels of where we were pre-pandemic. Consumer spending is strong, but the pandemic funds have been run out, so now we have debt, first-time consumer debt over $1 trillion. That's causing consumer delinquency to increase, repos to increase. Commercial property leases, 50% of them are going to be up in the next 18 months. And we all know what people working at home means to commercial property leases going forward. So balance sheets are going to be challenged over the next 2 years. So all those things point to a still challenging economy, right? And I think that we should keep that in mind as we think about the budget. Okay, Kim, you want to talk about the budget introduction piece?
Sure. Okay, so you all have your budgets now in front of you with some colored sheets. I'm going to try and keep things organized so that you know what we're working on. So the colored budget sheets are the Selectmen's approved ones. Budgets, those of you who picked up your budget binders early on have the white ones, so kind of keep those for historical value if you like. Without transfers to the capital reserve funds, the budget as proposed by the Selectmen is up 6.9%, which is just under $600,000. As the Selectmen have also included $1 million to be deposited into the capital reserves. And as John has pointed out, including the $1 million in capital reserves, the budget is up 12.5%, or about $1.1 million. No decision has been made on COLAs for employees or on changes in salaries that may be made as a result of the recently completed wage survey. So the Selectmen have added $150,000 to the executive portion of the budget, which is on page 1. They did a similar thing last year when they had the $200,000 that they were able to spread out. Employee health rates are not known at this time, but we have a maximum not to exceed rate of 14.6 for health insurance and 4.7% for dental. So those figures, your budget includes the highest rate, the 14.6. Adjustments will be made when we do get the final numbers. There has been considerable discussion about doing a better job of maintaining all town buildings. To that end, the Selectmen have included funding for a building asset management plan at a cost of $50,000 that has been recommended by Phil Sherman and Bob Harrington, and the others on this Whipple Hall Project Committee, Rip and Colin. After more than a decade of no increases in vendor payments for welfare, the Selectmen are recommending an increase of 56.3%. Sounds big, but it's about $9,000, but percentage-wise, it's big. Cemetery maintenance costs have been removed from the operating budget and will be funded from the reserve fund that was established for that purpose. So when you see zeros there, that's what we've done with that. For revenues, the estimates include an increase in current use land change tax of $40,000. That's something that we have to just kind of estimate. We don't know for sure who's going to take their land out of current use and be subject to a 10% penalty, but we think that $50,000 is a good estimate at this point. We have estimated a decrease in state rooms, meals and rooms tax of $162,000, and a decrease in state block grant of $285,175. So those are numbers the state gives us. Sometimes after giving us those numbers, they increase. We got some highway money of $80,000 a couple of months ago. So it's possible we could get more. But right now, that's what we're estimating. The budget also includes 0 proceeds for bonds. Last year, we had $300,000 in for the bond for the generator, so you'll see that that's 0. We don't have anything in loan funds for the moment. The selectmen have not announced any intention to put a warrant article on for any loans. But if there was a loan that was going to be taken out, that would be showing revenues. So when you look at revenues last year to this year, you'll see a big difference, and a lot of it is from loans. And as a reminder, the revenues are looked at again by the selectmen in October at the setting of tax rate. So this is really just a rough estimate. There will be opportunities, the selectmen will be able to change it. As October, we have a little bit better idea of things, and so changes can be made. So that's it for the highlights. As we've all been talking already, costs are increasing. So the services and the things that the town buys to provide those services, those costs are going up. I think that's pretty obvious to everybody. So that's what I got, Colin.
That's the revenue.
Thank you, Kim. Anybody have any questions for Kim? Kim, when does the Budget Committee have on its scheduled review of the revenue budget? It's not tonight, right? Is it later?
I think we do have it on tonight.
But I hadn't seen the revenue budget until tonight, so.
Did I put it on the agenda? I'm looking at it. Yeah, number 8. Here we go. Yeah, it's been on the agenda. We don't have to talk about it tonight if you don't want, Colin,
Okay.
but the only thing I removed from the first night was capital reserve funds.
Okay. I would, if the team is not adverse to it, I'd like to defer the budget revenue review until later on, if that's okay with everybody. Okay. What's the drop dead date for articles on the warrant?
If it has to do with money, it has to be presented at the public hearing, which I believe John wants on Valentine's Day, right? That's our public hearing,
That's
John?
right.
John's bringing candy and perhaps flowers for some people. So any money item has to be presented at the public hearing.
Okay. Okay, if there's no further questions on the budget introduction comments, why don't we move into the report from the subcommittee of the Budget Committee on Capital Reserve Funds. John, you want to take that?
Yeah, at our last Budget Committee meeting, we formed the so-called working group, the New London Budget Committee Working Group, and there were 4 of us that were on that, Charlie Kelsey, Colin, Melissa, and yours truly. We met twice with department heads prior to making our recommendations, and then we had a final 3rd meeting to make a final approval of our recommendations. Our recommendations have been written up and presented to the Budget Committee for either their approval or disapproval. And my understanding, Kim, is that they've also been passed on to the Select Board. So it's in your hands as to what the disposition of this report is. I think the people that I worked with on that committee were exceptionally diligent. I think we had a very good way of working together and being very productive. We took input from just about all the department heads, and I think that when they review that, they'll see that much of their input has been incorporated in this. So I leave it up to the committee to decide what they want to do with this.
Thank you, John. So are we in a position to have a conversation and vote on the matter, or people need more time to review the document?
I'd make a motion to approve this and forward to the Select Board for their consideration.
We have a second?
I second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Anyone against it? Okay. It so moved. So off to the select board it goes, and we'll see how that plays out there. Thanks, John, and thanks to the subcommittee. The next item is the capital improvement program. So I know that Adam couldn't be here today. Tim, you here? So do you want to walk us through some general highlights? So let me just put some context around it. So tonight is really just a high-level review of it. The committee itself will go through the capital improvement program and the reserves conversation later in the schedule, department by department. So if you could just give us context on what is in there. We also have Bob Bowers, who submitted something to the Budget Committee, who will take some time to have a conversation tonight as well. So I'll start with you, Tim.
Sure, thanks. I'll be brief because so from the planning board, the CIP is really just a guiding document where we meet with the department heads and talk about what their priorities are for the coming year and in the years beyond that. We tend to look at projects that are $50,000 and up, although that's not a firm rule. Sometimes for planning purposes, department heads want to put smaller items on there just so they can kind of have everything in one place. But the overall intent is not to do your job. So in terms of funding, it's really more of kind of a chance to step back, think big, and have almost a wish list for the departments. Now, it's not just kind of an endless thing, but they try to prioritize. These are the main things that we have to focus on. These are the big things that are coming up down the road. So it's really for that kind of step back vision process, I guess, versus the nuts and bolts of what you all are doing with the budget.
Do you have any questions? Again, we're going to get into the details of it at a later meeting. Can you give us some sense in the spirit of the conversation that happened at the top of the meeting between, with Lou's comments and John's comments about your reference to the master plan when you look at the CIP?
Yeah, I came a little late because I was at a different meeting, but as far as we do, so the planning board did a few years ago, did a master plan, which we are required to do every 10 years. So we do try to think about the CIP process in terms of the master plan. For example, I'm trying to think of what would be a good, like things that have come up in town around walkability or just community amenities or things like that. So we do ask department heads we do ask questions, I guess, as part of the conversation around how would what you're proposing to do fit with some of the goals of the master plan. It's not always something where there's a direct fit. Sometimes it's just a more mundane task they need, funding that they need for equipment or what have you. But we do at least try to keep the general premise of the master plan in mind, I suppose, as we have these conversations. And again, sometimes it's more germane to certain things than it is to others, but it's definitely something we keep in mind.
Okay, and so the CIP process doesn't recommend anything, it's just your...
Well, we do make recommendations. We've talked for a couple of years now, we've talked about we sort of put a lead recommendation for the police station funding and because we believe that there are significant gaps there. So we actually do make recommendations, but again, that's our job is really just advisory in this, and so it's just kind of a data point for you all to consider, and of course the select board as well.
Okay. Any questions, comments? No? Thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Mr. Bowers?
It was green when I came up. My name is Bob Bowers. I'm a resident of New London, and first I want to thank Chairman Loriot and the committee for allowing me to speak. I have sent a memorandum to you. You've all had it and read it, I presume. It's the same memorandum that went to the Selectmen, and it raises the issue of sidewalks. I like to think that in this context, the public, in a way, is sort of a department head, and it's not fitted into the system because it hasn't been asked directly. But the master plan, as I pointed out in the memo, took number one priority in this town was walkability, which I interpret as largely sidewalks, but it means all other modes of it. In that memo, I put forth a whole list of sidewalks that ought to be looked at in order that I propose to do it with. I propose some money into the budget. I do not delude myself into believing that you're going to adopt what I propose, and certainly the selectmen aren't going to adopt what I propose. It's a means by which I was trying to bring to your attention that this is a number one priority in the master plan. It is not being addressed in my mind the way it ought to be addressed. It hasn't been addressed will be coming up on 8 years' time this coming year. It has spread out some stuff over the next 10 years and still does not do some of the major problems that we address in this town. So my thinking is that you know financials much better than I do. I hear the difficulty you have in trying to balance not raising taxes and still meeting needs. I understand all that. There's a lot going on here. But I think this is something that has been shunted aside and needs to be addressed. The subcommittee on the CIPs and trying to put that together is a good step forward, and I appreciate that. But the budget committee is elected separately from the selectmen. They should not be adopting what the selectmen lay before them, a la what John says. But a la what Lou says, the master plan says this is the number one priority that should be attended to. So I believe that in response to your election by the residents, you should be looking at what is brought to you with a jaundiced eye, if you will, making sure that everything there is needed, looking at what might be saved. I think that's high on your list and has been for years on the list of what the Budget Committee does. One thing I don't think that is being done and needs to be done is looking at the projections of what is best for the town, what does the town need, and have the selectmen included those kinds of things in the budget process. And if they have not, the Budget Committee should step in and say, for our town to run and function properly, we need to attend to these things. So I think that your broader role of analyzing this means that you analyze that problem. You need to look at what might be the progress of sidewalk work. What is needed? What does it cost? What is more important? How does it go about? That's the kind of thing I would hope the selectmen would have done before they make a proposal. And a la what Lou has been saying, it should be a process by which everything is analyzed and laid out before you, and that has not been done. And I think you have limited power to do this, but you need to look seriously at that part of the capital improvement plan. What is the likely cost of doing what needs to be done? What do you have to put into the funding to make it happen? You currently have about $250,000 in that fund. It's not even being spent this coming year. I know there are reasons things can't be done. The water project is coming down Main Street, but that doesn't stop work on other parts, and yet there's nothing in the budget for this coming year to do sidewalk work that needs to be done. The first time is in 25. It starts on one end of town, but it doesn't, in the selectment proposal I saw anyway, the spreadsheet, it doesn't even get to the most important, to me the most important, but the part that needs the most work of repair. It doesn't anywhere deal with new sidewalks. The master plan talks about new sidewalks. In 2011, the town report, the master plan committee talked about that. Throughout the reports of the CIPs and the master plan process and the town reports, this is an important part of town. It has possibly, I can't tell you this is true because I don't do the research on this, possibly enhances the value of business properties in town. It may bring businesses into town and enhance our tax base. It may improve the value of property and enhance our tax base. This may, in fact, be something that is a producer of income for the town. You need to at least think about those kinds of things. So I'm suggesting that you take a hard look at the CIP function with sidewalks as a number one priority, understanding that you're not going to put $400,000 a year in as I've asked you to do. But you need to look at what it would cost. You need to figure out what Bob Harrington can do. It's ultimately out of his department. I have suggested in my memo outside help because maybe he can't have the time and the personnel to do it, but maybe he can. But it should be done on an annual basis. This board should be looking from now through the next 10 years, what can be done on an annual basis to meet the number one priority of the residents of this town. We're not a department, we're not in here with your budgets, but we have spoken through the master plan. There are a number of people I talk to on my walks through town that agree with this. And I think it's something that is important and that the Budget Committee has the ability to, it will be difficult, but has the ability to look at this and put this together. It even has a possible impact on workforce housing. You put workforce housing in when they put in the new, when they got approved the new workforce housing project, they talked about the walkability. Everybody could walk into town. Well, that's kind of true, but it's not totally true. But if you're going to enhance workforce housing, and if you're going to enhance it for the people of this town to get around, you need to have good sidewalks. I think it enhances the whole look of the town, the whole way people look at this town, the people who come in and shop in this town. So I strongly urge you, please look at the CIP, look at what you can do to have an annual attention to the work that needs to be done in this town. And finally, I'll make a request. When you have the time, go down to the corner of Main and Pleasant at Bar Harbor, walk down that little section of the street to the school, and turn left and walk into the school itself. They have repaved their road, but they also redid their sidewalk. It is fantastic. It is smooth. It is handicap accessible. It is 5 feet wide. It's the kind of sidewalk I think we need in this town. You may know or not know that concrete lasts longer, but it costs more. Concrete puts more CO2 into the atmosphere, not concrete, but the cement for concrete, than all the airplanes flying in the world. So there's a downside to concrete, even though it lasts longer. Bob Harrington can do the tarmac type of surface, so that's fine if he has the time. I urge you very strongly, please put in the CIP and annual funding and annual work to take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody have any questions for Bob? Bob, why don't you stay there for a minute? Mark?
I just want to say thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. This is my second opportunity serving on the Budget Committee, and I have been incredibly frustrated in regards to what we're doing about our sidewalks. It's embarrassing. So I really, really appreciate you bringing this forward.
Well, you have made my day.
Lindsay?
Just to piggyback a little bit on that, I appreciate it too, Bob, and I've kind of raised the issue before, and it became kind of like a horse, cart, chicken, egg, issue. Like, well, it's a state road, and then the water, lines are going to be replaced, and then we're going to dig them up, and then they have to be redone in the sidewalk, and it's never been just a straight answer. And I agree. Our sidewalks need to be traversable. If we require a new business when they're paving to, pay for the tip downs and the ADA compliance when they are having their entrances to their building, but then the actual sidewalks themselves are not traversable for anybody with any sort of handicap. I mean, it's a sea of pavement or tarmac or whatever it is. I don't even know. But I completely agree, and I think it's become so convoluted, the issue, because nobody knows what to tackle first. And, I've had this conversation with Kim, numerous times, like what do we address first then? Do you do the sidewalk itself? Do you do the state redo some of the, those egresses themselves? And like I said, I'm completely in agreement with you. I'm so confused after being on this Budget Committee for 10 years, even how to start the process to get it in motion. Because every time I kind of bring it up, there seems to be some sort of other convolution that just stops it. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense, and that's
Okay.
one reason my memo's a little bit longer than maybe it ought to be, because I have attempted to at least outline that the thought process needs to be put in place as to what's involved, what it costs, how it should be done, the order in which it should be done. I happen to believe that's the selectman's responsibility as overseer of the town. But if you say, do the sidewalks down from Holman's Corner to Cougar's Court, they say, well, the water main's going in from there on down, we can't do it. And I say, well, fine, coordinate with them as to what they're doing. My understanding is they're hoping to start this coming summer. They're hoping to have the whole thing done this summer. It partly depends on their own issues of financing and getting a bond and whether they get the bond in and borrow money before the bond for next year, et cetera. There are a lot of issues there. But that doesn't mean those are the only sidewalks in the world. There are other sidewalks. There are sidewalks we need to put in. There's the other side of the state road. Maybe you don't do it at the same time. All of these things require attention and an organized way of looking at it, but it means somebody has to sit down and do it. I would willingly volunteer to head up a committee or be the committee to put together something like that, but I don't think that's going to happen. It just needs to be looked at. It needs to be attended to, and your role can't be that role. I would love it if it were, but your role is to look at what is before you, what the master plan has said to you, what you can do to finance it within the realm of your authority, but you can't put together the plan, as far as I know, can you? You can't?
No.
No.
We could approve funding.
You're going to approve the funding.
But-
But you can be aware of the fact that funding's needed, even if it's not brought to you, and put it in. So I may say to you, well, they didn't do it this year. The selectmen didn't do it again this coming year, so I'm asked the budget, maybe I'll come here every year and say, put it in, because they didn't. That's not a very efficient way to do it. I would like to see a plan, start to finish. Here's the really important things to do now. We can't do this one now, so let's do this one now. Here's another place where we ought to look at putting new in. Here's where we can do it 5 feet wide, which is the new mode to me for handicapped accessibility. 3 feet, I think, is the legal standard. Here's where we need to knock on the door of the homeowner and say, can we sneak into your lawn a little bit to make the sidewalk work? There's effort involved, but that's not your job. Your job is to fund things when they are in front of you or brought to you. And I'm bringing this to you and hoping you'll fund it.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing it.
Thank you.
I congratulate you on this. The two main responsibilities of government at all levels, from our national strategy to local government, is number one, to provide for the safety and welfare of its citizens, and number two, to provide for the economic vitality that will maintain our standard of living. I agree with you in the fact that we have we enjoy an immense quality of life in this town, and partly is health, partly is fire, partly is police, and there are items that are lacking and which should be incorporated. I'm not going to say to the exclusion, but also in addition to those items that provide our safety. And that includes sidewalks. And if you look at page 21 of our master plan, it'll talk about transportation and walkability and accessibility. Today, if you are a person in a wheelchair and you're trying to negotiate Main Street, it is virtually impossible.
Yes.
We are a non-compliant town in that regard. The other item is the economic vitality of this town. If you look at many of the real estate apps and sites, they will provide per address, for each individual residence, they will provide a walkability level. And now it's starting to become, de rigueur. And I find it really sad that, for example, my own residence has a 1% walkability level.
Yeah.
And so are most of the residences in this town. I don't think there's probably a residence that exceeds 20%, and that's even living on Main Street. And it is to the point that it does affect the real estate prices and the living desirability of a particular neighborhood. Now, how do we make it happen? Yes, I think you've brought it up to our attention, and I think we should heed that advice. It is, on both counts of what a government stands for, we should take care of that, along with fire, police, schools, and these items that make our community enviable. So I don't know if there's a way, and, since we have the town administrator and the selectmen, and one selectman here, is there a way to publish an amendment or an addendum to a master plan? And no, Tim, you were part of the master plan development, were you? Is that an update that would emphasize items like safety and security?
Is that a question specifically to Kim or to Bibi?
No, it's a question.
Rhetorical?
I asked, Bibi and Tim, and, it's a question to the,
Well, in a procedural sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, the master plan is a 10-year document. They're not always quite 10 years, so you don't amend them. They are simply a representation of what took place and what the views were at that time. So I'm not sure that, and to get to John's point, having another piece of paper that says we ought to do the right thing, I'm not sure is productive.
it should be a little bit more explicit.
It should be, I'm going to give you $400,000 if you're me to build sidewalks. Or if you're John, I'm going to give you $100,000, whatever the number is. Yes, I didn't mean to take over the meeting.
No, this is great. I completely agree. I just know historically from my observations, the Budget Committee doesn't like to fund anything without having the entire process and estimated costs laid out. And that's where I kind of pointed out the horse and the cart, chicken and the egg, because there's so many variables. And that's where I don't know where to start with this issue. And I'm completely in agreement with you and want it solved. Mm-hmm. I don't know, as far as the Budget Committee is concerned, where our input is, because we won't designate $400,000 for land purchase unless we know exactly where the land is, what its use is. Historically, that's just been our background as far as approval.
Bob, thank you so much for this detailed memorandum. Really appreciate it, and I totally support what you're saying. And again, I've had the same conversations with Kim that Lindsay talks about, the chicken or the egg, right? I mean, I can guarantee you that if Bob just put new sidewalks in the last 2 years on Main Street, and then town people watched them get torn up next summer, there would have been a lot of unhappy people, for sure. But I do support having a plan. I'm all about planning for the future, so I would support that in some manner. I have a quick question for the subcommittee for the capital reserve accounts. Again, I've looked through your report. It's excellent. I really appreciate all the work that you all did on this. My question is, you didn't address the sidewalk installation fund except to say the select board should be made agents to expend from it. So I was just wondering if you had any conversation in your meetings about that fund.
John, you want to take that?
I was sleeping. What was your question?
Sorry. If during your meetings, if you all had conversations around the sidewalk fund, reserve fund, because you didn't make any recommendations other than allowing the selectmen to be agents to expend.
Yeah, I don't think that was really in the purview of what we were asked to do. The sidewalk installation fund, what we want to call it, there's no direction of where it wanted to go at that time, and so we did not see that in the purview of our charge to add anything to it. So while I have the floor, briefly, I agree with this sidewalk thing. I would like to see us wait until the water goes in, and I'd like to see us make a real example out of the sidewalk system and Main Street. I think that's where we need to go. I don't think we need to go to Knights Hill Park right now or some of the other suggestions. But Main Street is where the walkers really are, other than maybe going around Pleasant Lake. But I think that's where we're going to handle both of Lou's requisites there. It's going to be good for business, and it's going to be good for health, and let's make an example out of it. But we need to get some, need to get some quotes and see what we need to be aiming for. Right now, we haven't got the slightest idea.
Yes, you do. Mark?
I might have lost track of this, and just kind of going back to what Lindsay was saying. Aren't we doing like a Main Street plan, and wasn't that put on hold, and we had money set aside for the Main Street plan, and like, doesn't that include sidewalks? I'm a little lost. So,
Yeah, so
when we talk about process, why aren't we spending money on the Main Street plan to figure out what we need for sidewalks to get a quote to go and get repaired sidewalks? Like, I'm sorry, I'm just lost. I'm really,
Tim,
really.
you want to address that?
Well, and Tim may have some more to say about it. My understanding from Adam is the planning board has decided to delay that corridor. It's a corridor study, and will take various issues into account: sidewalks, entrances, exits, those kinds of things. And so they've put that off, I think, in part to find out what's going on with the, excuse me, the water main project. So it was more to do it in more collaborative with the water precinct. But if I can just add a little bit more while we're on the sidewalks, I have talked to a lot of people about it. I mean, I think that New London taxpayers should be applauded with their sidewalks. I agree with you, Main Street looks deplorable, and I think we can all agree that the water main project, which I've been here 12 years, they've been talking about it 10 years or close to it, a long time. But looking back at my time since I've been here, and I'm not even talking about the roundabout and those sidewalks around the pharmacy and all of that, 2012 and 2013, voters did the Pleasant Street from Job Seamans to Cougar Court, new sidewalks. Elkins sidewalks went from the beach to the dam, all the way to Wilmot, brand-new sidewalks. Parkside to the Outing Club, new sidewalks. Cottage Lane to Main Street, new sidewalks. So for a town the size of New London, that is amazing. I mean, I have colleagues in towns that say, we do not add sidewalks because we can't afford to maintain them. A sidewalk is like a road in a legal sense. It must be maintained in the winter. New London spent more than $100,000 on a sidewalk plow. We have to have staff to maintain them. So those things have been done by the voters of New London. 2022, $120,000 was approved for new sidewalks, and that was for the Main Street. So New London voters approve money when they're asked, and I think that between the Department of Public Works and we have, like with the Elkins project, it wasn't the Department of Public Works, have done amazing work. On top of that, we have gravel roads. I don't even know the number of gravel roads that have gone to pavement since I've been here. But people are anxious to get those done as well. We have a $250,000 road sweeper. That is because people want their roads walkable, bikeable, drivable. So I just want to make sure everybody realizes that New London voters have put lots of money into sidewalks, roads, and that kind of infrastructure. It's not like nothing's being done. And I sort of got that tone, Bob, when I read your memo. It sounds like we're not doing enough. To me, that's a lot. And certainly we could add more. If the town wants to spend more money, we certainly can. But understand there are other pressures. Gravel roads to pavement. There are a lot of people on gravel roads. They want money spent there as well. So I just think we need to keep in mind there's different pressures from various areas. But that New London has spent, I think, compared to my friends in other towns of this size, an amazing amount of money on sidewalks. And those four that I just mentioned are, I think, significant. Thank you.
May I offer two thoughts, one to Lindsay and one to this?
One is that my reading of the spreadsheet the selectmen presented to this committee had 4 separate sections of road to be taken care of in 25, 29, 33, and 35, something like that. My recollection is, and again, I forgot to bring that with me, is that they put in a figure of somewhere around $165,000. So there is an estimate from Harrington or somewhere that says for certain lengths of time, period, lengths of sidewalk, that's what his estimate was. You can go online, as I have done, and look at what it costs to build a handicapped accessible sidewalk per linear foot, depending on the width. You can figure that out very easily, and you know what those numbers are. In response to Kim, I don't disagree with anything she says. My memo says we haven't done anything in 7 years and it needs to come up. That's the number one priority of this town, according to the master plan, and it came up in 2011, even before that. So it's not so much that we aren't doing good things with sidewalks. We did in the past. It's not so much that there aren't, you wrestle with it all the time, the pros and cons of an expenditure. I understand all that. I'm pointing out that we haven't done anything in 7 or 8 years. We have numbers that are already attributed to certain parts of it. It's simply a matter of sitting down, calculating it, doing it, saying, here, we have to wait in Main Street until we see what they do, and if they tear it up this year, we can do it in 25. Or we can do another end that doesn't get hit, or we can do another sidewalk. You can look at a sidewalk that goes down, well, when you all walk down to the school, that sidewalk is, maybe you can't do anything with it, but it's not very good either. In my memo, I pointed out, I haven't brought it up here, new sidewalks. I walk down Gould Road very often, and one day a car comes careening up Pleasant, turns in front of the traffic, waiting to get into the school, scoots around the corner, and almost hit 4 kids who were walking from this elementary school back up to Seamans Road. Now, maybe that's not a high priority in some people's eyes, but it's certainly something that you need to look at and what it can be done. I have thrown out in my memo extending the sidewalk along Parkside all the way down to, get my streets right here, County Road, and I even suggest take it down to the park. Well, a lot of people say, well, we don't want to have sidewalks going down to the park. But it's a thought. It may be something you do in 10 years. But I think, and it's not your job to do this, I think there needs to be a well-organized, thoughtful plan of where we can do things now, even with work going on, where we can balance it against roads being paved, where we can do all this, but keep at it. If you do a little bit every year, you're eventually going to get there. It's like not ever getting to your destination because you have to get halfway there each time. This is the reverse. Do a little bit each time and you'll get there. That's my thought. That's my request. I thank you very much for not only listening to me, but the kind comments a few of you have made. So, appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. So I take away, I think, 3 areas here, 3 items, if I can summarize it. I know the water department, the water precinct is doing some analysis of when they're going to start their work. Can we, unless we have the information on the top of our head, can we take an action that would assess when they're going to start the work and finish the work and what the timing would be associated with doing that plan? Is it in this planning cycle? If they're going to start in April and they're going to finish the work this year, arguably it would be this planning cycle where we could actually do the sidewalks in Main Street, right?
Yeah, or you might want to attend the next, not tomorrow's Selectmen's meeting, the first one in December, the water precinct will be in, and I imagine some of those topics will be addressed.
That's good, and could Adam or whoever it is that's got that responsibility come back to the Budget Committee, and to the extent that the planning cycle for the sidewalks is in the planning cycle we're talking about, discuss what monies would be necessary by when to do the study to do the sidewalks.
For which, the Main Street?
Correct.
The water precinct? Yeah,
Correct.
once we know what the water precinct is going to do.
Okay.
Yep.
So that could modify the plan that the Select Board brought to the table, if in fact the sidewalks can be done in this planning cycle, correct?
Right, they have 120,000 so far that was voted in 2022, so.
But that, is
It'll
that,
depend.
is that to accomplish the study?
No, well, it could be, it's for sidewalks.
Right.
It's for sidewalk, yeah. And it'll be, I think that what the hope is that when the water precinct goes out to bid, I mean, they're going to, again, I'm assuming the sidewalks have to be torn up. I don't actually know where the water mains are, but I do think they're on that edge, so they will have to tear them out. Hopefully, when they go out to bid, that part of the project, because they tear up the sidewalks, they got to be put back. Hopefully, that can be in the same, the construction contract. We may realize some benefit financially that way. When they go out to
We do,
bid,
yep,
to
yep.
repair the roads, put in the water lines, repair the sidewalks. If it can be done in one project, I think it will be cost-effective for the town.
Short point of order on that, because you referenced the word deplorable, and I wanted to make sure that, Bob doesn't feel
I don't think
like-
I said deplorable. I think it was Mark.
No, you said deplorable, and I just
did?
want to make sure that Bob doesn't, that's why he's not addressing some of these
Main
points
Street.
on the sidewalk.
absolutely.
Because of some of these projects, so I just don't want Bob to feel like we don't
No, I mean,
appreciate him.
you've seen us put cones out there. I mean,
I'm not
we-
throwing
we
you
un-
under the
we
bus
under-
either. I
No,
just
we
wanna make sure it's on
understand that
record.
they are not, those sidewalks are not what you'd expect for a town like New London. I mean, there's no question about it.
Right, but-
And, they're so old, I don't even know when they were put in, but they're not, the width that we would expect, and same thing for the other part of Main Street.
In the interest of being
Absolutely.
fiscally conservative, that's why, because of these projects coming up, they haven't been
Right, I mean,
immediately addressed.
the 2017 Parkside to the Outing Club and the Cottage Lane to Main Street, those were built by Public Works. They understand what sidewalks are supposed to look like, they can build them.
So the two other items I think that are related, but to Bob's point, it's not the Budget Committee's responsibility to come up with a plan. But I don't know that there's any, so Bibi, I'm going to give this to you. I don't know what venue this town has. Usually they have committees. Committees take a look at things. Committees lay out suggestions to the select board. There is no committee on sidewalks. There's no committee on a number of items in the master plan, right? So I don't know how the town measures the priority of things if they're not getting input. Bob has an opinion of what's important. I have an opinion of what's important, but those opinions aren't being aired in a formal way. There's no structure to the conversation in the town. So I would ask that you bring to the select board the request to put structure around that area and the other master plan areas. Otherwise, how do we as a group prioritize the investments against the master plan, notwithstanding your comments about it, in a manner that makes sense? We don't know, right? And the second item, again, is not ours, but I think it's related and provides us context, is how do we measure our success of the master plan? Does anybody ever look at it at the select board level or in the town and say, for the last 8 years, we're at an A, a C, an F, a D? How do we measure and provide feedback to the town that what they consider to be important is actually getting accomplished? And how do we use that as an investment tool? Because at this juncture, there's nothing like that. So I would ask that we get some insight about that. And perhaps we can have that as one of the community meeting discussions.
I completely agree, Colin. I think that actually feeds into, if you don't mind, what Dr. Wilson addressed in the first place, is that there isn't any priority or process or operation standard for it, so therefore it's been a joke, so to speak. So I agree. Get on that, BB, okay?
So, Bob's comment about anytime people talk about sidewalks, they think Main Street. If you read Bob's paper, it goes way beyond Main Street. But the question is, how would the town prioritize that list? How do you even have that conversation in the town? Who's having that conversation in the town? Nobody. So I think those are the three things that come out, and I think there's only one over which we have control over, unfortunately, Bob, and that is what money can we spend this year in the budget for the study, to the extent that's required, and for sidewalks that are in the budget, right? Please, yeah.
I served on the CIP as a representative from the Budget Committee, and new to the whole process. I thought it was really well done. I thought it was thoughtful. One takeaway was, how do we prioritize the items that are on the capital improvement program? And should we look at some kind of methodology to say, this is a high priority, this is a medium priority, this is a low priority, contextually for a given fiscal year and contextually for a 10-year period. And the people at the table of that discussion, I think, that really need to weigh heavily on that are the department heads. I think if we've all looked at the first year capital improvement plan program total, we are looking at a significant amount of money. And the projection 10 years out is significant. So I think the Budget Committee will have, by its structure and obligation, a necessity to ask for the prioritization, because I'm uncertain whether all the things that are there are actually fundable and prioritized in a manner that makes sense given our resources.
Well, who would you suggest has to do the prioritization? The Budget Committee, the Select Board individually?
I think when this committee looks at the capital improvement
Yep.
program,
Yep.
we're going to need to ask the questions to the department heads specifically, where does this sit in some rating of priority relative to their expertise and knowledge of the particular items? And then I think we have to step back and say, does that make sense? It does make sense. Based on everything I heard from the budget, from the department heads, I thought they were incredibly thoughtful about what the items were, what the estimates of cost were, and there was not a discussion necessarily on priority. And I think that's where we ought to take it.
Go ahead, Lou.
You know, and it weighs on me last year, since I was, if you want to call it wet behind the ears in the Budget Committee, that was my first year, that, we did make some cuts, which were, in my opinion, a bit haphazard, when it comes to long-term investments, for example, in fire and police, that we're probably going to either delay it or pass it on to our kids or something like that, but we should have a much better idea in a future circumstance that if we have a financial crisis or a period of financial instability, that postponing items may end up having a particular effect on the effectiveness of our first responder force. And I still, and I think, again, last year we made some cuts that I think eventually we're going to be paying for it in the long run, one way or the other.
Any other questions or comments? Tim, thanks for showing up. I appreciate it. I just want to share with the committee one of the thoughts I had with the Select Board, and I would like to see whether we can, as a committee, if you think it's a good idea. When we get into the actual CIP reserves conversation, I'd like to see the entire 10-year CIP plan mapped to the capital reserve fund on a 10-year basis, so that we can take a look at decisions we're going to make this year, how does that flow into the future years, both on a reserve basis and on a bond basis. And we can then have a perspective over the next 1 to 10 years on that 1% rule that we have to abide by. Is there a 1% rule for?
I never heard of that.
Hold on a minute.
John, have you heard about that?
10%, I'm sorry, the 10% debt limit? The 10% debt limit rule?
For borrowing money?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd like to see how we can map all the CIP into this piece of paper, look at it from a reserve and a bond point of view, and understand what decision we make this year, how does it affect the future years, and you can cumulatively begin to lay that out so that we can see if we make an investment of $5 million this year, what happens over the next 10 years on that $5 million on a bond basis, if we want to save money, and having them on both. What I observed with the Select Board is they were looking back and forth. I think having on one piece of paper was very helpful. And it will help us do that exercise, all right, to really understand that. And I think that having that point of view will give us a tool that will allow us to think through prioritizations and what it means to the future taxpayer. Today, what my experience has been over the last couple of years is we look this year at next year, and then we look this year at next year. We're not looking at what are the implications of that several years out. And I think that would be important for us to do. So if you're all in agreement, I would like to ask Kim and Lynn to lay that out for us, and then we can have that for our detailed conversation.
Good idea.
Okay? Okay. Okay. Having said all that, I've just lost my agenda. Oh, please, yes, go ahead.
Just real quick, thanks, about so the planning board does talk pretty frequently about the master plan. Since we put it together, it doesn't necessarily come up every meeting, but we do kind of talk about the overall goals. So just that, I don't know that we do a report card, I'm not against doing that, but, and then the other part, to confirm what Kim said about, we did put in a request for funds for a Main Street Newport Road mobility and safety study, but we just put that in 2026 because we've realized that the costs for those, the consultants have gone way up in like everything else in recent years, and that there wasn't the money right now, and we also wanted to wait, to Kim's point, until after we know what's going to happen with Main Street with the water mains, but that's definitely a big concern for us. And then as far as just our overall goal with the master plan is to, again, continue to reference it so that it doesn't just become something that sits on a shelf for 10 years, but that we keep talking about the goals. We're doing a lot right now, working with the Housing Commission on some, proposals around that as an example of a priority in town, along with things like, walkability and well, all the other priorities that we have. So we do kind of tease out some of the priorities from the plan into the kind of year-by-year stuff that we do. So
Is
just,
there anything, Tim, that you could share with us, and there may not be, that would give us a sense of how the plan board is coming out on our progress against the plan?
I mean, it's hard. We did, this was put together kind of in the thick of started before the pandemic and then kind of during that. So things changed. And as far as progress, I guess I haven't really thought recently about scoring it. I mean, we're not moving quickly, as quickly, I think, as anybody would like, but I think that's the nature of it. We have, as an example, we're really interested in what's called form-based zoning, which is a more flexible type of zoning where you can get more creative with not just delineating this is a business, this is residential, but where some of the mixture and where you can actually get more creative use of land and again, increase walkability, looking at things like, do we really need all the parking regs that we have? Would we be better served to be more creative in how things like that are used? So we're trying to have those discussions kind of on a regular basis, I guess.
Okay. My only concern with the plan, if we fund it in 2026, that would start a year from next July.
Right.
If I know it's an if, right? If this water precinct starts their work in April of 2024, you would want to have a plan done so that you're giving them some direction on how you want the sidewalks done by the end of 2025, not starting in 2026, right?
Yep, no, I get that. I could be wrong. The last I thought, I was thinking that it was a 2-summer project. I thought it was happening over 2 summers, so that could have been.
Well, and I guess that's what we'll find out, yeah.
Yeah, that was our understanding at least, was that it was not going to be done in 1 summer, so 2 years, yeah. So
Okay,
that was part of the thinking
Okay.
as well.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any other comments around the
Hi, my name's Karen Epstein, and just wanted to pass along, my husband and I have had the pleasure of attending many of the water precinct meetings, which tend to happen on the first Monday of each month at 4. So I guess there's one happening this Monday. Can't say that officially. But what we have taken away from our attendance is that what they're looking towards is a 1-year project, as you discussed, I think, Colin, maybe thinking starting the spring and going through the summer. But that remains to be seen, so I'm not here to try and speak for them, but that is what we've taken away.
So that would impact the planning side of it?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay, any other conversation about CIP, something that we're going to do shortly. It took us a long time. Next agenda item, Selectmen warrant articles. Nothing yet?
Unless BB has some in mind, I have not heard of any yet.
No, not
Nothing.
that I know of.
Okay. Bonded debt and TANs. Kim, you want to take us through that?
We could do the easy one first. Everybody knows about the TANs, right? Tax anticipated note, $1. Be the easiest thing hopefully we do in this budget process. Any questions on what a TAN is? No? Okay, bonded debt, as we know, those are things that you really have no choice about. Town meeting has decided to incur debt, so the town must pay for it. Our most recent, Lynn is now working on going through the bond bank for our most recent, the $600,000 plus the $186 for the repairs here. That's our newest debt. Also, you can look in the town report. Each year, we publish all of the debt that we have, so you can see the expiration dates of the debt, which will go into the discussions when we talk about capital reserves as far as debt limit, which is what Colin brought up earlier. Okay. Did you want to go through all of the individual loans? I think you kind of...
I have no interest in doing it. I don't think we need to. But Kim, maybe you can just keep us all on the same page on that 10% rule. What is it? What is
Well, so there's different, DRA will give suggestions as to how much debt does a town want to incur, and it can be as a measure against valuation of your town. Operating budget is a typical one, and so the idea is that a town does not have so much debt that it puts it into a financial, could potentially be a financial crisis. Steve Thoreau, your treasurer, looks at our limits constantly. We are, at this point, really nowhere near the limit. Obviously, we don't want to ever get near the limit. I don't know what percentage we're at now, but it's really nowhere near the higher limit. But again, these are suggestions. Towns can really go into as much debt as it likes. But most towns try to be conservative. And I think New London, the last 10 years, we have gone out for more debt. Some of the sidewalks that we've done, this building, we have West Side Drive, when we did those two bridges, Pingree Road, we have gone out to debt for things that we used to use capital reserve fundings for. And the idea was the interest rate was low, and so the town decided it's better to borrow money and do those projects that way. So we have, in the last 10 years, incurred more debt than probably previously.
Is the calculation of that debt, the 10%, just the bond principal value, or does it also include the annual
You're talking
interest?
about the principal amount.
The principal.
Yeah, how much you have out in debt.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Because the payments obviously can fluctuate depending on where you get the interest and, you know.
Okay.
So while I would say we're nowhere near it, obviously you obviously don't want to get too high.
Yep. Okay, the next item is revenues. We talked about deferring that discussion, and we have time permitting going through. It's now 7:52, and administration, town clerk, tax collector, insurance, assessing. Are people prepared to go through those budgets?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Okay. We'll defer that to the next meeting, giving everyone a chance to go through the budgets that they received. Other businesses, anybody have any other business they want to discuss? Yeah, Lindsay, go ahead.
I apologize. I have to be out for the 13th and the 20th, but I will diligently watch the video, so I apologize in advance.
Okay.
I will not be, I will be in California on the 28th. That I have a commitment of in Lake Tahoe.
Oh, tough commitment, huh, Lou?
Thank you. I will be thinking of you and
Try to get over the mountain first.
thank you. If it is possible, I don't know what the connectivity will be in our cabin, but if it is, I will do my best to join in.
Well, that brings up a question. At this point, we haven't been Zooming people in other than that one meeting.
You know, Will and I talked about that today, whether we can Zoom in and still use our equipment here to record meetings, whether we can do both, because we find that the Zoom recording is not as
Very good.
good. And so the question is, can we do both? Can we have the monitors be used for the person zooming in and record it with our thing? So we're going to look into that. Will's like my technical guru, so we all kind of play with it, and we have somebody at the town office on a Zoom meeting, and we kind of move around and try to figure this out.
Lindsay, is
Takes a
that-
village, is all I want to say.
Is that something that you can do, or are you out of pocket completely?
I am,
Which is fine.
yeah, I'm having some surgery, so I will be out of pocket, especially on the 13th. But
Okay.
I do know historically, we have used other methods just for the communication purposes of the Budget Committee members. So the Zoom wasn't necessarily, or the meeting wasn't necessarily available live to the general public, but, you know,
Like a
we used
conference,
Face-
telephone.
Yeah, we
You
used
could
a
use a
conference
telephone.
or FaceTime or an iPad to be present, and that was within the jurisdiction that I think the governor's laid out, so.
Well, so long as everybody in the audience can hear the person who's away.
Right.
And the person who's away from the meeting can hear everybody in the room, that's what you have to have. You don't have to have visual,
Yeah.
but you have to hear.
Yeah, it wasn't, before even the pandemic, we'd tried this a few times, so we, you know, people could call in, it was just for the purpose of the Budget Committee members to have their discussion.
Okay. Anybody have any other business? Okay, our next meeting is next week. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a great night.
So Colin, should I resign or what?
Absolutely not.